Welcome back to Church and State with Chris Farrar and Brian McCall. We are coming to you earlier than expected because a lovely Christmas gift arrived on December 18th, a dubious dubia from the Congregation for Divine Worship. So we're here to talk to you about what the Institute of the Good Shepherd called the Christmas Massacre. So,
not unexpected. The rumors that we get about these various depredations coming out of Rome really tend to be well-founded. When these rumors start coming, they're really from reliable sources, and so it's pretty much a confirmation in advance of the event. And we had those rumors. They call them voci, or voices in Italian. When the voices begin speaking, you know something terrible is about to happen.
Yeah, well, maybe some occupants of the Vatican are hearing voices from some nether quarter. I don't know.
Now,
well, we're speaking
coming from. Yes, the response to the dubia.
Yes, so this is what we're talking about. Responses to some questions that they claim they've received. I doubt everything. I doubt everything these days. From bishops related to the prison guards of tradition, Traditionis Custodes, asking some very specific questions. So a lot in here. We're just going to talk about some lowlifes or some highlights. One of them says that the pontifical and the ritual have been suppressed.
Oh,
abrogated. Abrogated.
Oh, yes, he abrogated them. The liturgical books of the church from time immemorial, he abrogated them. Well, that's a joke. He can't abrogate them. So we can ignore that ridiculous command. He has no power to abrogate received and approved rites of the Roman Catholic Church, which come down to us through the centuries and are part of liturgical patrimony. It's laughable.
It leads you to wonder what's next. Is he going to abrogate the Bible?
He's already abrogated the Bible in many ways. He just said the other day, a few weeks ago, back in August, I think it was, that yes, I follow the commandments, but not as absolutes. So the 10 Commandments are relativized according to him. He's been abrogating the Bible since the beginning of his pontificate. Go look at the Denzinger Bergoglio website for all of the crazy, twisted interpretations of Scripture he's given us over the last 8 hellish years. Mm-hmm. So these dubia, Father Z had a very interesting observation about these dubia. They're obviously a put-up job. Nobody asks questions that precise. Can I binate if I celebrate the traditional mass? What they did
can I publish in the parish bulletin a mass?
Yeah,
it's absurd.
What happened here is he wanted to go even further than Traditionis Custodes. But he couldn't do that without looking altogether too mean. So he pretended that he's answering questions about Traditionis. But he's not answering questions. He's adding new restrictions. A lot of these things don't appear in the original document. So under the guise of these questions, he's saying things like the bishop's permission to celebrate the traditional mass does not extend outside the diocese. A priest can only celebrate 1 Latin mass per day. If a priest celebrates the Latin mass on a weekday, if he celebrates the Novus Ordo on a weekday, he cannot celebrate the Latin Mass on a weekday, which eliminates all of the bi-ritual offerings of Mass by priests in the Novus Ordo establishment who are coming back to tradition. None of this was in the original document. Questions were a put-up job like his phony synods and his phony survey, which preceded the issuance of Traditionis Custodes.
But hasn't he done this before? So he issued a Amoris Laetitia with a footnote that in a contorted way says sometimes you can give communion to the divorced. And then he gets a letter, something from the Argentine bishops, not an official document. He just, in a note back to them says, oh, yes, that's what you should do. Give everybody communion. So, this is a pattern.
The letter he solicited. Yeah. Please write to me and tell me what I want to hear so that I can tell you that what I want to hear is the right interpretation.
Right.
I mean, it's shifty political maneuvering by a political operative who acts like a Peronist party boss instead of the Pope. And his mission is nothing less than to root out and destroy any vestiges of traditional Catholicism. He's made that clear now. He spent the last 8 years mocking tradition-minded Catholics. And this is what he thinks is the coup de grace. He's going to cut the movement off, chop off its head, stifle the seminaries, eliminate all the vocations. He thinks he's going to get away with this, but I have to say this is in a way a clarification from heaven. We now know that the religion this man is promoting is not traditional Roman Catholicism. It's something else. Whatever it is in his head that he's trying to promote is not the faith of our fathers.
So, I mean, it looks like it is a two-pronged approach here, right? One of it is, well, maybe three-headed monster. One is to shut down traditional masses in parishes. So nobody could ever wander into a parish and happen to see a traditional mass. They've got to be in some oratory that's out 700 miles, from the center of the diocese on, at 4 p.m. So get them out of the parishes so people don't see them. 2, take away the authority of the bishops, saying, oh, by the way, I saw a bunch of you didn't do what I wanted when I told you were in charge, but you're not really in charge. Give me back power. And then 3, try to attack the so-called Ecclesia Dei communities. I mean, does that seem to you his sort of way to go after the whole movement on 3 levels?
Sure, it's a pitchfork. He's going to a 3-pronged pitchfork. He's going to drive it into the heart of the movement, he thinks, and kill it. He wants to kill the baby in its crib, wants to kill the movement by cutting off vocations, cutting off parish masses, limiting the number of masses that can still be said. This is maniacal, and I would say to the heads of the traditional orders, now is the time to make a stand. No longer can we engage in false obedience to arbitrary and unjust commands that cause harm to souls. You have to say no and refuse to obey. Let him excommunicate the whole lot of you. It's a ridiculous, invalid excommunication if he does it. But I'm thinking of the fight the Eastern Rite bishops had when the Pope wanted to change their date of Easter to make it conform to the date in the Western Church. And they simply said no. Go look it up in the Catholic Encyclopedia. And the Catholic Encyclopedia explains that they thought their tradition was of apostolic origin in the East. And so they wanted to stay with it, and they refused to change it. And that was not, says the Catholic Encyclopedia, a schismatic act. They have the right to defend their tradition. This Pope has no right to abolish a tradition. It's not his possession. He's not a dictator. He's not an absolute monarch. And when he exceeds his authority, like any ruler who exceeds his authority, he must be resisted.
So the orders, the various groups of priests should just on saying mass wherever they have been, keep teaching their seminarians to say the old mass. But what about bishops? What should a bishop do faced with this? I don't know what happened, but I heard over the weekend the Bishop of Tulsa was supposed to confirm on Sunday in the traditional rite. I don't know what happened. I haven't heard yet what he did. But if you could advise the bishops, they say, well, what should I do? What should they do?
Well, this is the real problem. You identified it before we came on the air.
Yeah.
The problem is, who are the bishops that are going to ordain new priests for the priestly paternity of St. Peter and the Institute of Christ the King, when they've been told that they are forbidden to use the traditional ordination rite? Who will ordain these priests? Is there a bishop out there who's willing to defy the Pope? I don't know the answer to that one. Maybe the bishop could say, I forget which bishop did this. It was one of the bishops in the Midwest, I think. Maybe the bishop could say, well, this is a universal law, but I, as the bishop under the Code of Canon Law, have the right to dispense from universal law, so I will do so in this case. Maybe that's the way a bishop could do it. But if the bishops aren't willing to ordain these priests, and they can't find a bishop anywhere to ordain the priests for the Ecclesia Dei societies, then we're in a situation very much like that of the Society of St. Pius X, back in 1988. Where Lefebvre, Archbishop Lefebvre, by the way, confirmed my wife before the so-called schism. Archbishop Lefebvre said, they're promising me a bishop, but I don't see it yet. I can't trust them. And he went back on the accord because he did not trust the Roman authorities. And now we know the Roman authorities cannot be trusted. They will just rescind any promise that they've made. This Pope thinks he can rescind the Roman ritual and the pontifical. He thinks he can abrogate the traditional Latin Mass. He actually thinks he can do that.
Well, I want to focus because a lot of people are talking about this Canon 87. And again, I'm not sure that's the right approach. Because again, if he's what he's basically saying is, I, a bishop, get to dispense myself from something that the Vatican has reserved to themselves. I think that's a weak argument legally. To be honest with me, if I were the bishop, the bigger argument is just say this is all not law at all. I don't need to dispense from anything. This is not a law of the church. It exceeds your authority. And I'm going to proceed using the pontifical that every predecessor of mine before 1970 used, and go ahead and do it. I don't know if we engage in their game and act like we're dispensing, from some goofy law that doesn't really bind.
Well, that would be the right thing to do. But the problem is these bishops have to be prudent. So if they take that approach, they're really basically defying him, because he thinks that he has promulgated a law. So some of them, out of prudence, if they do anything at all, will probably say, invoking Canon 87, I'm just going to dispense from this law. And I just don't see any of them saying no outright to this dictator, because he is a petty and vindictive man. He will take his revenge on them. Again, he's a party boss as opposed to a pope, and he loves to wield power while pretending that he's not doing so.
Well, it does focus our attention, because it's almost like, the second punch, like, I really meant it. I really did mean it in July. Sorry. I don't know if you read it this way. I read it potentially as a message, particularly to the U.S. bishops, because a lot of the U.S. bishops really did the right thing and just sort of said, well, yeah, that's nice, but everything's fine in my diocese, so everybody keep doing what you're doing. And this, I read it as really directed to those bishops saying, sorry, guys, you're not with the program. That is not what I want. That is not the response I wanted.
But notice how he's doing it. He's not rebuking them. He's just imposing additional restrictions.
Yes.
Additional restrictions that they will have to navigate around while pretending that was in the original document.
Yes.
And so he presents the additional restrictions in the form of questions. These questions did not come from the bishops. Maybe one or two of them did. He might have told his friendly bishops, send me some questions that I want to hear, so I can give you the answers, such as a priest can't binate. He can't say the traditional mass if he says the Novus Ordo, or he can't say more than 2 traditional masses in a day. This is nonsense. Nobody asked that question. Father Z makes that point, that these are these absurd pretend dubia that are obviously just what he wants to impose. So he pretends he got these questions, and then he amplifies and adds to the provisions of Traditionis Custodes. That's what's going on here.
Now, another interesting, again, obsession, like the binating, you can't put it in the parish bulletin, which I don't think there's ever been an order from Rome about the way you publicize a mass schedule at a parish. But anyway, a third one that is really obscure is he seems to have some obsession with the readings in the vernacular being from this particular Bible. Like, that was one of the strange things in Traditionis Custodes. And now they come out with their new index of forbidden books. You can't publish a book that would make it convenient to actually read these. You got to go look them up in a big Bible somewhere. I mean, what do you think this obsession is? Why this focus on this translation of the readings?
Well, it's the first step, I fear, to the elimination of the traditional cycle of readings in favor of the Novus Ordo lectionary, which you need a wheelbarrow to carry around. It's a massive collection of books. A cycle of readings that's so long that you never get at the inculcation of the lessons that you get from the traditional cycle of readings, such that unless you're brain dead, if you're sitting in the pews in the traditional mass, after a few years, you know all the Gospels. You may not be able to cite chapter and verse, but you know all of the parables, all of the sayings of Jesus, all of the events in the gospel, because of the repetition of the cycle, which is the whole point of the traditional cycle. And it coincides with the times of the year. The lectionary destroys that. Monsignor Geimer called that the destruction of the Heimat, the German word for homeland or home. There was a destruction of the liturgical homeland, left people confused and disoriented, and now they know less about the scripture than they did before. And of course, they're all nodding off in the pews of the Novus Ordo. When Sally gets up and does her part and says, "Word of the Lord," you think anybody's really listening? Although there are people, in spite of everything, in the Novus Ordo managed to hold on to the faith. We're not saying that there are no Catholics in the Novus Ordo. We're saying that they managed to thrive in spite of it, because of their personal piety and the grace of God. But objectively, the liturgical reform has emptied the pews. What's there to attract people? Now, I know of many conversion stories that resulted from mere exposure to the traditional mass. My own wife being among them. The mere sight of it inspires people. They say to themselves, that looks like very serious religion. Something mysterious is going on here. But not in the Novus Ordo. When Father Tom comes out in his polyester vestment with his microphone in hand and says, "Good morning." It's a social gathering.
No, I mean, you refer to that.
He's transitioning with the Bible into the another sort of lectionary.
No, your point about the mind-numbing bit of it, an example I remember is the from the days there, the general intercessions. And I always thought people are so mind-numbed by it that you probably could slip in between the general intercession praying for the nearly extinct species in the Amazon or the re-election of the latest Democrat president for the return of the traditional Latin Mass to every altar in the church. And people probably would just, oh, let's pray to the Lord. Lord, hear our prayer. I don't even know what they were. You could probably slip that in.
Well, this is their childish and really puerile notion of participation in the liturgy.
Yeah.
And now Sally gets her part. Now Sally gets to say something. And now Tom gets to say something. And now Jim gets to say something. It's show and tell. This is for children. This is not how you participate in the liturgy. You participate in the liturgy by immersing yourself in the prayers of the Mass, which is not an easy thing to do. We always fight distractions. We're only human. T.S. Eliot once, in one of his, I think it's in Four Quartets, said humans cannot bear very much reality. It's difficult to grapple with the reality of the Mass. So they think they can make it easy and then oversort it by chanting a few slogans or reciting a few lines, but that has not increased participation in the liturgy. What increases participation in the liturgy is your willingness to engage in what Pius XII called active participation, which means actually trying to understand and immerse yourself in what is going on the altar, not just mouthing some words or making a show of outward superficial participation. So, his mission obviously is to basically, as we see when he says you can't even advertise a traditional Mass in the parish bulletin, is to make it disappear, to make it go away. He thinks he can make the traditional Mass, whose canon is of apostolic origin, disappear by the force of his will. It's a joke. It's not going to happen.
I mean, I think I said to you before we were on air, it almost reminds me of that hypothetical speculation of Suarez that, he just, as an absurd, kind of reductio ad absurd speculation. What if there was a pope who tried to excommunicate the entire church and to, declare himself the only Catholic?
And change all the rights.
I mean, it's almost like that's what we have here. He wants to just sort of get rid of everyone except himself.
That's a very good point, actually. I mentioned that passage from Suarez in an article I did for The Remnant. And I treat it as a hypothetical, but I think you're right when you say it was actually a reductio ad absurdum. Let's say we had a pope, and this is completely ridiculous. Let's say we had a pope who would, change all the rights of the church. We would obviously have to resist such a pope, said Suarez. Well, we have a pope who has changed all the rights of the church, Paul VI. And he was resisted. He was resisted successfully for 40 years until Benedict restored the Mass, released it from its false imprisonment, and admitted what had been true all along, that Paul VI only gave the appearance of prohibiting it, but never actually prohibited it, because he has no power to prohibit the traditional Mass. Doing that would be, as Ratzinger wrote elsewhere, foreign to or alien to the spirit of the church, meaning the Holy Ghost.
But isn't this the problem here? You say, well, he can't do this, he can't do that. If you think fewer and fewer of them under Francis, but some kind of court, apologists would say, oh, but he can do anything. He's the Pope. The Pope is the supreme authority. So how can you say he can't do anything or can't do something?
That's a category confusion. Supreme authority is not absolute authority. Supreme and absolute are not synonyms. Okay, so the Pope is the highest authority in the church, but not even the highest authority in the church has absolute authority. No one on earth has absolute authority. In a sense, not even God has absolute authority. There's certain things that are so foreign to the divine nature that not even God could do them. In other words, kill himself, for example. He doesn't have the authority. God does not have the authority to kill himself. That's a difficult theological question, but on earth, for sure, no one has absolute authority. And the Pope is not an absolute monarch, as Pope Benedict said, whose thoughts and desires are law. But we have a Pope now who thinks that his thoughts and desires are law. He said during one of his airborne press conferences, I'm constantly giving statements, issuing statements and documents. That's magisterium. That's what I think. He thinks the magisterium is what he thinks. He said this on the airplane. It's in a transcript. You can look it up. So he thinks that whatever he thinks is the magisterium. No, the magisterium is what he has to think. He must think as the magisterium thinks. It's not the other way around. He doesn't seem to understand that popes have no authority to reinterpret doctrine, to give us new doctrines. They are, as Pope Benedict said, obliged to remain faithful to the deposit of the faith and hand it on untouched, and resist all temptations to water it down, and every form of opportunism, as he put it, speaking as Pope. By the way, isn't it incredible that we have a Pope who is so arrogant, so dictatorial, that he thinks he can overrule the pastoral provisions of his own living predecessor?
Yeah.
Just amazing. We've never seen anything like this in 2,000 years. And, since this is church and state, isn't it strange that we see things in civil society that have never been seen in the history of human society? Entire classes of people being considered unclean and excluded from social life because they won't be vaccinated with a stupid, useless vaccine that now requires up to 4 shots, and even that won't be effective. Well, in the church, the unclean are the traditional mass adherents. He wants to purge the church of the unclean ones.
Well, there you have it. There's kind of our high-level reaction to this bizarre pre-Christmas gift from the grouchy Englishman, who, by the way, I was speaking to
Monsignor Roche, or anyone at the
yes, Monsignor Roche, the Roche
Congregation for Divine Worship.
The Roche in the Vatican. I was speaking to Father Laval, who's the head of the Coalition for Canceled Clergy, earlier today, and he told me what's interesting is that I think Roche is among them, but several in the Vatican actually have their eyes set on the Eastern rites, and that when they say one rite, this is like the first step of their master plan. So, our friends, the Eastern Catholics, better watch out, because they may be coming for you next.
You know what? The Eastern Catholics, some of the rites, they'll just ignore him.
Yeah.
The Eastern rites are not going to allow their rites to be supported by this maniac, which is what he is. I mean, it's maniacal. No pope has ever dared to do the things he's doing. He makes Paul VI look like St. Pius X.
Wow, I never thought I'd hear you say that. But
yeah. And John Paul II is pretty great right now compared to this character.
Well, there you have it. There you have it. I think the last thought, to sum it all up, just ignore it. That's about all we can do with this. Just ignore it. Carry on doing what we've always done, whether you're priest, bishop, or layman. And thank you for your time, Chris, to talk about this. And we will see you next time after Christmas at Church and State.
And say a prayer that this initiative of this Pope is stopped in its tracks by bishops who have the courage to say no to an unjust and immoral law.